Okay, so we're live with this is Bridget's Press, and we're here to celebrate the book launch of Beverley Lee and Keith Anthony Baird's book, A Light of Little Radiance. And we have a few guests with us. We've got Steph and Kev and Nicole to join us. So we'll start by going around the room and doing introductions. I'm Heather.
I'm Steve.
We're Bridget's Press. You guys aren't really here to see us. So Bev, you go next.
Okay, I'm Beverley Lee, a dark fiction author from the UK. My writing specialises in atmosphere and the build-up of dread. I also write vampire fiction, gothic fiction. My vampire fiction at the moment is with the lovely Nicole there in the centre. We have a trilogy combining our two vampire universes called A Conclave of Crimson. 2 books are out. The next one is out next spring.
Oh yeah, I'm Kev Harrison, and I'm a writer of horror and dark fiction. I'm very much into folklore in all its different flavors, and yeah, my most recent release is Shadow of the Hidden, which is my debut novel, which is also with Bridget's Press, and it's an adventure horror in the Middle East.
And there's lots of food.
Baird. I'm a dark fiction author from the UK. Obviously, I've written a vampire novella with Beverley, which is why we're here. Previous titles were, Spinneret and Synthetica by BGP. And I'm currently working on a alien invasion post-apocalyptic series called Windrust. But I think I'm only about 20k into that as we speak, so I've got a long way to
go. Hi, I'm Nicole Eisner, and I write gothic vampire horror romance. Most of my work is also infused with 17th century French culture, which is the background of my main vampire protagonist. And my books out now are Beguiled by Night and Citizens of Shadow. And those are the books Beverley was referring to that unite with her Gabriel Davenport series, A Conclave of Crimson. So it's been a wonderful, wonderful journey getting those 2 worlds together. And we can't wait for book 3 to be out in the spring.
I'm Stephanie Ellis, and I write dark fiction and poetry. Usually in the genres of folk horror, some gothic, some post-apocalyptic or sci-fi mashups. My most recent is The Barricade with Lichen Valley. That's a post-apocalyptic sci-fi horror, and people keep telling me to shorten the description, but I don't know how to do that. But there's that with a menopausal main character in it, which I loved. Horror novella in verse, which I wrote with Shane Douglas Keane, Mason Gorey. So if you like slasher horror with a bit of the Headless Horseman in, that's quite a fun read. And my latest short story was with Flame Tree Press in their Odin anthology. So that is Norse mythology retelling. So a bit of variety there from me.
So we have a lot of books that you could add to your gift list if you don't have them yet. So usually we start by me talking about how my mother is the narrator in my head, because when we were growing up, my mother read to us before every nap time and every bedtime well into our teen years. And actually, I'm going to tell a side story. So when we were younger, my sister was just complaining the other day that every book we ever read as children were at my reading level or slightly higher and nowhere close to hers. So she never knew what was going on. She said, I'm the only person who's read Frankenstein that doesn't know what Frankenstein's about. So when we were younger, we took a trip to Estes Park, Colorado, which is where Stephen King, and we stayed at the Stanley, which is where Stephen King got the inspiration to write The Shining. And my mother, she had read us all of the real fairy tales. While we were there, she read us The Shining. And and we got to, back then you could stay in the Stephen King room that he stayed in. And so there's a scene in the book, and Stephen King is very descriptive, and he describes the bathroom very descriptively, and they had not updated the room much since he had been there. And my sister walked into the bathroom and came right back out. And from that point forward, we had to go downstairs to the lobby to use the public bathrooms instead of the bathroom in the room because she refused to use it. Recently, like a month ago, we went to a resort in Missouri to have a reading weekend, and we all read our own books. And my sister, who has always kind of been like, oh no, I don't really read horror. I don't, she was ruined in horror because of The Shining, frankly. I woke up in the middle of the night and my sister was watching Bird Box on her phone. And I was like, I don't know if you know this, but that's horror. And she was like, I know, but I love it. And so it was kind of funny because she won't read it in a book, but she'll watch horror films, which is kind of nice to her. So anyway, because of that, when I really start to enjoy a story, the narrator in my head becomes my mother's voice telling the story. And that's usually when I greenlight a book. Because there are certainly stories that I read and books that I read where my mother never becomes the narrator, but I always get this kind of like, oh, this is going to be good. No matter how it ends, this is going to be good because my mother's reading it. So here's where it happened for me. There's only bane and death here. Another storm looms in the east, beginning to fold its shroud over the jagged ridge line that punctures a rupturing sky. Soon it will rake the slopes and descend into vales with icy reach. For a lone wayfarer walking the ghost road, it spells a cruel passage through its nameless tract of the northern wastes. Sorry, I butchered it. Dyslexia can be rough. There are too many R's and G's. But so that's, if you guys have read it, that's the very opening. And I have a surprise for you guys. Hold on one second.
Hello.
So those of you it's Danny. So for you guys.
Oh, hey,
Hi. I don't know why I look like a ghost.
Yeah. Hi, Danny.
wow.
Yeah. So Danielle Bathsheba is the illustrator of the cover, and which I think maybe appear in the upper right hand screen. It doesn't mind. I'm not sure what everybody else always sees, but she's a fantastic cover artist. We've used her for several covers now, and they are all fantastic. So we weren't sure she'd be able to join us, so we held it back just in case she couldn't come. So
Surprise.
Beautiful. It's absolutely beautiful.
Thank you. I had a lot of fun making it.
Plug yourself a little bit because we've kind of already gone around the room. So
Plug myself.
What are you working on? Yeah, what are you working on right now?
What am I working on right now? So right now I'm working with Inception Group as their designer. And I'm working on creating some immersive experiences in London. So namely, the current project are the Mr. Fogg's pubs. So
very fun.
It's super fun. It's great to just be able to work with all sorts of weird sourced assets and create all sorts of little detailed things such as like showstopper glasses and custom vessels and everything. So it's really great. Yeah.
Yeah, that is great. That's fun.
Ooh, do I look like I'm melting to the rest of you?
Yes.
Like a ghost.
Yes. It comes and goes, but you definitely have a melting filter, like you're the Wicked Witch, and you've been splashed with water.
What's going on here?
It looks like
It's very on brand, so I think it's fine.
It's very on
brand.
brand.
It is on brand. You're in the right spot. So
definitely.
So let's start with Bev and Keith. Where did the story come from? Like, what made you both? I'm interested to know how you both came together to write the story together, because I have to tell you, it's kind of like a dream come true for me. Though I was worried when we got the manuscript, because usually it takes me a very long time to read Bev's books. because the
You get
dread,
scared, yeah.
right, the dread really like builds up
Sorry.
my anxiety level, and it takes me a long time to settle down before going to bed. So I was like, oh, I think this will be fabulous because I've been a fan of Bev's for a while, and I mean, I think Keith could write a horrible dry obituary, and I'd be like, fantastic. This should be published. And so I was like, this will be really great. I hope that I can get through it in a timely manner.
Yeah, you did.
So I did.
It was Keith's idea. So you run with this one, Keith, because you were the one that proposed it to me all those years ago.
Well, I mean, as you no doubt can all tell, you know, I'm the oldest one here, I think, on the screen. And the book obviously is Europe's Dark Age, and I thought, well, that's where I'm from, so I may as well write a book. Yeah, I was probably born in the 15th century or somewhere. So, but anyway, I just thought it'd be a cool idea to, you know, because obviously the kind of hysteria that was taking place across Europe at that time, I just thought something set against that backdrop would be really cool. But then I kind of also wanted a different sort of origin story for Selena, and that's quite difficult to do because it's kind of like, how can you create a vampire, you know, in a way that hasn't been done before? So,
Right.
I mean, kind of like how I envisage it, I think, you know, Steve was sort of saying, oh, it's kind of like it's a bit sort of face hugger, sort of alien kind of thing, you know, and I did get his point. I didn't really sort of pick up on that at first, so I kind of had to like adapt that a little bit, but I still wanted it to have that sort of cosmic horror element. So it would be something from another dimension, really. So that was kind of like the initial concept, and then what I did was I just gave it to Bev because I just knew in terms of character, you know, we needed a troupe. You know, we needed her family, and I just thought from this point on, Bev will do that so well, you know, because everything she does is you know, character driven and just kind of like lush language. So I was just like, oh, I can't wait to see what comes back.
It was like, here, Bev, just create me 6 vampires.
Yeah, just go, you know, just go wild, just do your thing, you know. And I mean, I was already aware of Bev because I put out Diabolica Britannica, and it was, you know, she sent a story for that, and I just kind of thought to myself, well, I think when we both write in a gothic sense, you know, it should work, you know. And of course, you know, over here in the UK, you know, Bev is the go-to for vampires, so it just made total sense, you know. It was just the person to go to, so that was it. Hello, Jenny.
Jenny.
Oh, hi, Jenny.
Hi, Jenny.
So Steph does all our proofing and formatting, so she kind of has the privilege of always reading everything we put out. I don't know if it's really a privilege or a curse, but
it's a privilege. I really enjoy it.
So she's always one of the first readers, and the thing I appreciate, I'm going to plug Steph's services for editing and proofing and formatting just for a minute, because she never plugs this part of her work. We would be so far behind if we had to do every single piece of it. And I think maybe because it's become a little obvious that sometimes when a press goes under, and we get an inquiry, I'm like, well, of course we're going to relist your book, which of course puts us behind the very carefully crafted schedule Steve develops at the beginning every year. But I'm like, hey, Steve, I just told these 4 people we'll take on their books. That's fine, right? Like, we can fit it in. So Steph and Steve really get to eat the brunt of that. So, but I appreciate it because every time Steph puts her eyes on it, it's having another really good set of critical eyes to be like, hey, this scene is fantastic. Hey, this scene needs a little bit more. Or, hey, I don't understand how we got from A to B. So I'm just saying, if you're needing an editor, if you're needing somebody to help you with your work, You can check out Stephanie Ellis. She's got a website. Provider services listed there. But so Steph's read it, so she knows. And I mean, she's known Bev and Keith for a while, so she's kind of familiar with their sense of dread. And I feel like this story really, I know I say this a lot when we talk, especially about Bev's work, but the dread is almost like its own character in the book, is this kind of feeling, which can be hard to sustain even in a novella. And I just think that's one of the best parts of the book. It's a great story, but I love when you end a story with your character of dread, just like you start it. Because the passage I chose not to read, which probably would have been easier with less R's, was the bit where she's she can hear the wolves and she's trying to find a cave or a shelter to hide it. And like, you guys, that's the second page of the story. And so here we are already to the dread. Page 2. And so it's kind of a, like, my heartbeat always races in those kind of scenes, especially anytime you hear wolves. I'm a prairie girl and we don't have wolves here, but we have coyotes, and they don't sound the same, but they do have a very distinct hunting summoning. They summon their pack to the hunt, and they summon their pack to a kill when somebody takes something down. And so anytime I hear any kind of canine pack animal chatting or howling, I'm like, oh boy, here we go. Somebody's going down. So there's a dead thing somewhere. So I think that's characteristic of the rest of the story. So my question is this. Is it intentional? Do you sit down and go, okay, page 2, let's start the dread? Or is it something that just naturally happens? Like, is there just that much dread inside of you that comes out?
It's just story. I mean, I'm a huge fan of story and character come first, and the dread is just part of that. Like, some stories are more dread inducing than others. I mean, we never talked about that, did we, Keith? We just how it organically happened.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I was responsible for the opening section. Because obviously Beverley didn't really understand. Well, she understood the concept, but she hadn't seen any of it at that point. So obviously, I wrote the intro and then sent it to Bev. But I certainly wasn't sitting there thinking, I must infuse as much dread into this as possible. I mean, obviously, I was trying to create a scenario of, she needs to, outwit the pack. She needs to get away from them, or she needs to at least, get into a situation where she can put her back against a wall in a narrow channel and maybe get a knife out or something and just fight them one at a time. And then sort of the idea of the glacier and falling through. That sort of came later, because I was thinking, well, what can go on from this, and how can we get to the origin of the sort of piece? But yeah, I mean, I don't know. I don't think I'm full of dread. I don't think that. I mean, there might be people who actually dread me. I don't know. That could be the case. But if I get my dread from anywhere, it's probably from like chocolate bars and things like that, which I've got here. So I maybe stuff myself full of dread, and then it just comes out in the writing or something like that.
Well, I mean, listen, you can certainly bring the dread, and it's interesting to me that it's not intentional, because Spinneret is very, and I think the scene for me in Spinneret that did it was the dress. This.
Okay, yeah.
Oh, yeah, it was made from the skin of the children. Yeah.
Yeah, this skin dress. And it was just like, oh, there's going to be dread in like till the end. Now dread is a character. It's not,
all I can say is, for that book, Keith must have eaten a lot of chocolate.
Well, you can tell by my round face as well, I've eaten a lot of chocolate. So, yeah.
Yeah. So, and I think that's one of the great things about the cover art. And this is, I think, where Danny really shines, is you can give her a concept and be like, so we're thinking this, and this, and this. And then because with the cover, what's interesting is the kind of orangey yellow glow of the fire. I hate to even admit this out loud, but I'm going to. I looked at this cover like 6 times before I realized it was fire. But something very frightening about it. Like I kept telling Steve, there's something about the orange that frightens me. And I think it was actually Steve that pointed out, well, Heather, you're afraid of fire. So
Yeah. I'm
sense.
afraid of fire too. That makes us both.
Right. So that makes us both like, oh, yeah. So
well, it's also if you look really close, it's it's a witch burning. There's a figure in it. So yeah.
And it's funny because we blow up the art so big, right, on a screen, but it's so different when you see a book, like when you hold it in your hand and you see the art, you're like, oh my gosh, like this is bad. Like somebody's
you guys should see the original drawing. That's always really fun. It really gets people because I think that there's always going to be a degree of separation from the artwork if you're viewing it through a screen.
Right.
But when you have it physically in front of you, and especially when you have the physical drawing, it's a totally different experience visually because, your mind finally puts 2 and 2 together and goes, oh, somebody made this. Somebody had to conceptualize this. It didn't just appear on a screen.
Right. Yeah, but it's very, it's very clever how it leans in, like everything leans towards the fire. Everything leans.
What I loved about it was the fact that Danny got it straight away. There was very little change from that original conception that you sent us to the finished product.
Thank you. The source material was incredible to work with. You had a lot of visuals that could be poured into it, especially, all the folk art that we could pull from, the fashion, the history itself, even the church bell tower is actually right outside my window.
Oh, wow. That's excellent modeling. Yeah.
That's the way to do it.
So what's really funny is the biggest back and forth about this book cover was the color of the font, because we were a house divided between Bev, Steve, and Keith and I. There were 2 votes for blue and 2 votes for I'm going to call it pink, though that's not really its true color, that it ended up. And we ended up deciding by literally Steve and I flipped a coin. Like,
nice.
It got a little nasty in our house. And so,
oh my God.
Wow.
That makes me happy though, because it shows that it clearly meant enough to you. It resonated with you in a way where it's like, we're gonna fight to the death over the color of this font.
Yes.
Yeah. So it was funny because early on we had a fight to the death over an editing piece in A Man in Winter, which is when we decided that I would not be in charge of any kind of real line by line editing. And I mean, like it was almost a death situation then. And we decided to take it back. It was bad. Steve slept in the living room. Bad. So
just for a couple of hours.
Right. But we took it back to the author and I said, that's fine. Let's ask her. And she sided with Steve. She wrote back and she's like, oh, I think that works better. Let me write it up and I'll send it back to you. And I was like, you've got to be kidding me. So, but we try ever since then. We try to get the battles down to heads, tails situations so we can flip a coin and let fate decide what it's going to be. So it cuts back on the fighting time. So for sure. But
it's a good method.
Yeah. So what I want to know is why horror? What made you all want to write horror? Like, do you have a horror origin story, or was it something you just wanted to try on, or did you always know you would write horror?
Oh gosh, I've always been kind of attracted to the darker side of fiction. I mean, my first Stephen King was Cujo. Read Cujo when I was 14.
Yeah, that's quite one.
Terrified me, and I loved it. I loved that. But I think the reason I like horror is that it examines things that don't have an explanation, and then it forces you to use instinct rather than logic.
Hey, that's a great
That's a
answer.
good
Who'd like
point.
to go next?
I'll go next. Yeah.
Okay.
For me, it wasn't really sort of books from an early age. That was more sort of my teen years. It was early teens. I had a friend who lived on the same estate as me, and he was an only child, a guy called Ray, and he got everything he ever wanted. So he got like a color TV for his bedroom. He got a video recorder. He got all this stuff, and we used to sort of ask his mum to go and get us 18-rated films from the local video store, and she would. So we were watching Halloween and The Thing and all this kind of stuff when I was like 12, 13, that kind of thing. So, I guess that really...
We lost him.
We lost Keith. Now, maybe this could be because of the storm now.
Yeah.
Oh yes, there is a storm raging here. But I am also in a very haunted nunnery, so I'm going to blame the camera nonsense on the ghosts.
Yeah.
Gosh.
You're back, Keith. You're back. Oh, except we can't hear you.
We can't hear you, Keith.
Oh no!
Maybe he can't hear us.
Can you hear us? Oh no.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah. Technical issues, sorry. Yes,
Yeah.
it's really just down to Ray Pearson and his mum for sort of kind of like, poisoning my young Catholic boy mind at the time. That's what it is. I was all sweet and innocent before that, so it's not my fault.
Before the horror movies.
I know you don't believe a word, but there you go. It's the truth.
Who's next?
What about you? Who's next? Who wants to do it?
I'll go.
Yeah.
So we flip it.
Yeah.
All right. I'll just say that I didn't really read horror when I was young, until sort of late teens, early 20s. But I preferred darker literature then, and it was Dickens for me. His books have very dark characters, very dark social situations, and I started reading him from about the age of 11 onwards, and I still love his work. But reading his made me, when I picked up other books, they were too light or too frivolous. I do like fun. I love Hitchhikers. I love Guides to the Galaxy. Yeah. I love Terry Pratchett, things like that. But literature in general, I preferred the darkness, and I went through a phase of the Russian authors. I've still got Solzhenitsyn on my shelf, things like that. I like the dark aspect of the human soul. And I think when I started writing, I sort of accidentally fell into horror just because I was writing this dark aspect. And I thought, I'm home. This is where I can sort of find myself. So yeah, that's mainly why I blame Charles Dickens. That's me.
And can I just say that it's Steph's musical taste as well? That's very dark, isn't it?
Oh yes, I love that.
We're on the same page there. We're definitely on the same page, Steph and I. Yeah.
I don't scream, but Kev does.
In past
I
life.
think screamo rather than screaming, because you're scared is what I meant there.
So what about you, Nicole? What brought you to dark fiction or horror over any other subgenre of literature?
Well, it's probably good for me to spin off of Steph on this one, because I also didn't grow up reading horror or anything like that. Although I did have a really bad habit of sneaking into this drawer that my mom had where she kept books that I was not allowed to read. Hey, that's the first way to get someone to want to do something, right?
That's right. The forbidden.
Yeah, so she loved reading books about serial killers and true crime, and she also had a copy of Clockwork Orange, and I read all of this when I was 10 to 12.
Okay, then
Had
that's
no
very
business reading books like that at that age, but I got to a point where they terrified me and I didn't want to read them anymore. But I would say as a young person, the number one author that influenced me was Madeleine L'Engle. And
yeah.
I could not get enough of her books. I read many of them over and over again. And, you know, I don't think you could describe her as a dark fiction author, but she does deal with a lot of like grief and darker situations, especially for the age group that she targeted with her writing. So I definitely think she was a huge influence on me. But I also, for me personally, I struggle with calling myself a horror author sometimes because I'm not sure that's the best label for me. I feel like, you know, vampires by their nature sort of fall under that horror umbrella. But for me, it's more about the history and the characterization of the vampires and what motivates them and what makes them behave the way they do and how they exist in a society with their nature. And so for me, like Beverley, we are both extremely hardcore character driven authors above anything else. So it's not even necessarily the subject, it's about the characters and their responses. So
yeah. What about you, Kev?
Yeah, so for me, like I did read some King and some James Herbert when I was very young, like 8, 9 years old, that kind of thing, from my dad's library. But he also had this set of a magazine, and maybe some of you other British folks will remember this magazine called The Unexplained, and it had like UFOs and ghosts and like demons and this kind of stuff, and it was all, you know, true. How true? Who's to say? But you know, like I remember reading like an article in there where they'd found like evidence. I mean, gosh, evidence of a demon on Wimbledon Common. And me, like 8, 9 years old, I was like, oh my goodness, this is amazing. So this just like sent my little imagination round the hamster wheel sort of eternally, and it's still going.
I thought it was Wombles who lived on Wimbledon Common, not
Brought the demons, Keith. I'm pretty sure.
You're probably right, Kev. That's probably true.
You've been deceived, Keith. It was demons all along.
Furry, cuddly demons with big snouts, yeah. Collecting rubbish. Fabulous.
And Jamie, I want to know what got you into cover design.
Cover design is just kind of something that I naturally gravitated towards. I think it's so much fun to be given a really detailed story with so many characters that have such intense backgrounds, and to be able to distill it into one image that would be iconic to the story is a really fun challenge for me. And so it's something that I've always wanted to do. I love the idea of illustrating a full book, but being able to get something that is a fully dynamic idea and trying to communicate it in one shot through one illustration is really fun. It's fun to kind of break down.
Okay. What about you? What got you into horror?
Probably where I grew up. I grew up in New Orleans, and there's just all kinds of ghost stories, voodoo stories, witch stories, ghouls. I mean, you name it. I mean, the whole town is tinged with a sense of
this is true
things that might get you after dark. So be careful.
Yeah.
And don't wander into the swamp because there's
that's also
several
true.
different creatures out there. So
also true.
And I read Stephen King growing up. I read a lot of older horror authors and different anthologies I found in the school library. Lovecraft, Ambrose Bierce, a lot of old Edgar Allan Poe, a lot of old older writers, and I love that time period. I love that style of writing. Yeah, I mean, I don't know.
Yeah.
I read a ton of scary and horror and dark stories. So.
My gateway drug was definitely Grimm's and Parole as a small child. One of my favorite things to reenact was Bluebeard, which is difficult to get your sister to play the wives that get beheaded over and over again. But when you're the oldest, sometimes you get to decide who gets to play what character. So, but I did take a break. Horror and I broke up when I was a teenager because of Stephen King, and because I was an avid Stephen King reader, and we almost broke up over Children of the Corn because I'm a Kansas girl, and if you know, you know. But we broke up over it, and it scared me so much I had to cover all the mirrors in my room. I took my bed down off of its frame, and I stapled my curtains closed, and I turned on every single light on the house. Stephen King's It was the start of my, if I'm scared, all the lights have to be on, not just the light in my bedroom. Like I went all the way to the basement and worked my way back up to the attic and turned on every single light bulb. And as you can imagine,
there were several years of struggle in our early marriage.
Yes. Yeah. So
involving lights.
As you can imagine, my parents were not thrilled by all the lights, including their bedroom light needing to be on. So I've actually to this day never finished it. I think about it every once in a while. I think, okay, well, I'm 51. I can handle it. I'm not a teenager anymore. I've got it. And then I'll pick up Steve's copy and I'll be like, no.
Well, you still can't handle a story that involves clowns.
No, I hate clown stuff. Listen, I have there's a word for it. I forget what.
Coulrophobia.
Yeah. And I've got it bad. And I have a personal theory that if anybody grew up going to Shriner circuses, you have it. Like there's no escape from it. But
there was an anthology that came out recently that I got, Fear of Clowns.
Oh.
And when that came in, I had to take the package upstairs and open it. I couldn't even open it.
I didn't want to see the cover. I was like, no, come on now. We got to be able to sleep. And listen, I didn't make you take it upstairs, but you knew if I'd seen the cover, we would have been sleeping with the lights on for several days. So, because listen, you guys, I am 51, but we will sleep with the lights on. Every light in the house has to be turned on.
No shame in that.
Right. So
no shame in that. Do you?
It does get to Steve sometimes because Steve prefers it to be dark while he sleeps, but it's just, listen, I bring a lot of charm to this relationship.
Yeah, we manage it. We very carefully do not watch any
compromise. Maybe you could have a night light,
Yeah. Yeah, we do. Like anytime I'm reading a book that scares me, Steve cuts it off at noon. If he's not at home working, he'll call and be like, hey, what are we reading? Just romance, right? For the rest of the day, nothing else, right? No more horror. So, and it's hard in the winter because it gets dark so early. Yeah. It'll start to get dark here in about 2.5 hours. So it really cuts it
very dark here.
Yeah, because it's evening time for you guys. Yeah.
Yeah. I just wanted to clarify because you asked me what got me into cover design, but I should say what got me into horror.
I
think that there's a common thread that I've heard from everyone here beyond just reading horror stories and getting that emotional response from it, the adrenaline, the love of the characters. Ultimately, I think that the connecting thread here is that within horror, you don't really have the same restrictions as you would in something like a romance novel. You can push the envelope further. And I think that with that almost comes an exploration of human psychology and of the meaning of life itself. I mean, we've talked a lot about dread, existential dread. That is something that we can explore freely in horror. And I think that it makes living more fun, which is really weird. But I guess the way that my toddler brain interpreted that is that everybody was always one specific mid-color palette to my mind's eye. But then when Halloween came around, everything was dark and bright and high contrast and fun and unexplainable, and you don't know what's hiding around every corner, and it just makes things way more exciting. I relate to Dracula much more than I related to Barbie, and
right.
I think Barbie's far more frightening than Dracula, to be honest.
yeah.
But I think there is a freedom in speculative fiction, horror and fantasy and sci-fi, that sometimes doesn't exist in some of the other genres, because readers expect a certain thing. And, when you pick up a fantasy book or a horror book, it could go any way. Like there's no telling how that story is going to end. And I will tell you, horror writers and dark fiction writers are not afraid to kill characters.
No.
And it is one of the dreadful truths. Like I do sometimes as I read, I'm like, okay, now listen.
Don't get too attached to anybody.
Yeah, I do. I have to be like, it's going to be fine if she dies. We're going to be fine. It's going to be a shame. I don't know how the story will end, but we'll live through it. But you do kind of have to talk yourself through it a little bit, because dark fiction writers, man, are not afraid to be like, and they're dead or they're missing forever and they never come back.
Yeah, y'all go hard. I mean, really.
Well, what you were saying, Danielle, it reminds me, I can't remember who said the quote or where it comes from, but it was basically, nothing makes you love the light more than the presence of darkness. Something to that effect.
Yeah. And that is true, because I will tell you, you'd be hard pressed to point out a horror writer on the street. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
it's not
that's
like
the scariest part.
Lipstick, or we have sweaters we all wear on Fridays. So
there should be though.
Correct. But
something that Becky and I frequently discuss, though, is how subjective horror is as a term, because it's sometimes it feels a little problematic as a blanket genre term, because horror is so broad and so subjective. Like you mentioned, you have the fear of clowns. Like other people love clown horror, scary clowns.
Right.
Some people are scared of spiders, or serial killers. I mean, it's so broad, and the dread that you mentioned, like with Beverley's books, and like both of us, I think if we were to get really specific, would fall more on like the quiet horror realm, because there is that dread and not so much like gore or physical horror, so to speak, body horror, things like that. So we're constantly tossing that conversation back and forth a little bit to see like where do we fall on that spectrum, because it's a challenging genre to work in for that very reason.
I would agree, because there's so many different types of horror, and what one person finds dreadful, another person, like they're like, I didn't feel any dread at all in that story. And so, I mean, we all bring our own stuff to the table.
All right, so that just makes me think a little bit of an off the wall question here, and I'm going to pose it out to everyone. So I'm sure everybody has seen the Wizard of Oz movie, or read some of the books growing up. So there's the scene with Dorothy and the Scarecrow and all. They're going through the forest, and they're saying, lions, tigers, and bears, oh my. If you were in a place, what would be the three things you would say? For me, it would be spiders, snakes, and wasps.
That's pretty good. Wasps, I hate wasps, but I love spiders and snakes.
What would y'all be chanting as you're going down through the forest? What are the three things?
The three things. Wow, that's a good question. That was an unscripted question, so he had me a little nervous. Right, it's really asked him, but that's a good one. That's a good one. Huh?
So
boy, your three
anybody
things.
Can start.
Wow.
Well, I haven't got three. I've only got one, and it's
right.
Moth, which is crazy, because I have a character named Moth who I love dearly. But this all stemmed from when my daughter was about 7 years old, and we were staying in a cottage in Cornwall, and she was an avid reader, and it it was in the summer, it was warm, she'd gone to bed, she'd read with a light on, she hadn't turned the light off, and I went in to check on her, and literally the whole room erupted with moths. And I had to fight my way through them to turn the light off, and they were all in my hair and everything. And yeah, I'm trying to get better because they're very harmless little things. But yeah, it would have to be a forest full of moths. Sorry, moths.
Oh wow, I feel like that's warranted.
I think mine would be firstly sharks. I don't like sharks. I think they're genuinely sort of really friendly things. Had a bit of a run-in with one in Brazil on a reef. So yeah, I wasn't particularly happy about that. Nuns would be the other one. I think nuns, I find them very scary.
What are your ghost nuns?
Well, I think there's a lot of repressed violence going on there, and it just, and then inspired by Kev, I would say wombles now, because I've now found out that they're demons and they're not actually, so it would have to be wombles.
Keith, I thought you said gnomes, not nuns.
Gnomes. Well, they're quite scary as well, actually. Gnomes,
Yeah.
Especially one that's a nun as well.
No.
And with the wasps, like Steve, because they're terrible, and also horses, because horses try to kill me at every opportunity. And this is like years of this, like decades even. So
with knives and stuff, Kev, or knuckle dusters, or
whatever they can get their hands on. Honestly, they're absolute savages when it comes to me. So it's really bad.
Savages. You have some kind of karmic battle with horses. Like this is like several lives going. It sounds like not just this one.
Yeah.
Yeah. Horses and wasps. Okay.
Well, I'll go. I would say for me, it's the thought of being like alone in the dark somewhere, on the streets.
Yeah,
that's a very specific kind of horror. And also, I'm very claustrophobic. Like small spaces, really like being confined terrifies me. Which is why I had a really hard time reading The Sum of Your Flesh by Beverley.
Oh yeah,
a lot.
Yeah.
But I powered through it because I love her. It's a wonderful book anyway. But yeah, those are the top things that come to my mind. But also, I have also spent time in the South, especially in New Orleans, and flying cockroaches should not exist.
Yeah, that was one of mine, girl. Oh,
like that. That is just wrong. They should not.
Yeah, that shouldn't be allowed.
No. They're bad enough on the ground, but in the air too.
Yeah, it's not good. It's not good.
I remember from my childhood, my mother actually running through the house with a cockroach flying in her direction. Yeah, no, big one too, like this.
Yeah, water bugs. Why do they call them water bugs? Yeah.
Steph, I couldn't hear you earlier.
Yeah, I know. I was muted. I forgot.
Oh, okay.
Daddy Longlegs. I can't stand crane flies. I'll sit there in a room and I'll watch them, and I'll find a magazine or a rolled up newspaper, and I'll just sit there like that and watch. I just can't stand them.
And because they're all kind of fluttery.
It's the fluttery. Yeah, anything that flutters around
the unpredictability of it. I had one in my shower. I already got in the shower, and it was in there, and it was huge. And there were a lot of screams.
Yeah,
I don't like those either.
Can I just impart a bit of knowledge about crane flies? They're actually extremely poisonous, and if they were able to bite you,
stop,
you'd be dead. But they're proboscis.
No.
Yeah. It's true. They're extremely
they're very toxic to humans. Don't eat them.
Yeah.
I'll look that up. I did find
news, Keith. Thank you.
I'd throw that extra horror in there for you.
Yeah, I was reading up on them because I wrote a short story called Hybrid, and it actually involved crane flies. And when I was reading up on them, the males, that they can lose parts of their body, the legs and everything else, and they'll keep going. until they've mated or whatever. It doesn't matter which bits are falling off. They just keep on.
Well,
but I did read about the poison.
Which would have to stay, wouldn't they, in order for that to work? So.
Yeah, but it's just ugh.
Lord. I didn't have a thing about dotty long legs until maybe now.
It'll be all right.
You collected some new fears out of this.
Yeah, we're collecting some fears. What about you, Danny? What would be your 3 things?
For me, I was going to say those flying cockroaches, the water bugs. I hate them with a passion. There was an incident when I was younger where there was a huge one and my uncle caught it and he smashed the body and it dislodged the head. And the head rolled away and we didn't know where it went. And so 3 weeks later, I found the head and I poked it with a stick and its giant jaws were like, rah, 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 and it was still moving. And I'm like, no, this is from hell.
Yeah.
No. And the other thing is kind of weird, but technology, like especially dated technology, early 90s, it's bizarre. I'm convinced that this movie scared me so much. I just can't remember what it's called. It's a Japanese film where the concept is basically that the afterlife is too full of souls, and now the ghosts are trying to enter the world of the living through technology, through screens, through like weird pixels and static, and that scares the life out of me. It will, like, listen, I'm in a haunted nunnery. I live here. I love it. I talk to them. I leave them treats. They flip trash can lids. It's a nice relationship. But if anybody came through with like static on my phone and was like in the middle of the night, I'd die. I would die. I'd just die.
Yeah. That reminds me of something I read about recently, a new development in technology. I mentioned it on a panel as well, and it's where there's a university in this country and they've done something with touch so that there's sensors on the hands so that somebody on the other side of the world can touch somebody through a screen, you know, on the opposite side. They're bringing that element, so it's almost like a hand through the screen, but it's all to do with senses and things. Yeah. I can't remember the detail, but it was like, oh, you could, you know, if you wanted to hold someone's hand on the other side of the world and you couldn't get to them, you could sort of touch the screens and that you would feel. I just thought, oh dear, there's a lot.
How do you know it's a person on the other side?
I don't know.
It's gonna be asleep with the lights on. I can tell. It's like it's 2 o'clock already here.
Oh, if you have your hand on the screen, if nobody's on the other side, feel something.
No. Well, if you want me to kind of diffuse the fear of the portal, if I'm not mistaken, they had one of the portals in Dublin that was kind of like a screen and a matching one in New York, and they had to take it away because people were just getting naked in it.
Yeah, I remember reading about that.
Love it.
And I can assure you it wasn't us. We wouldn't be public on a screen if you paid us. We're very So, but let's see, what would be, you told your 3 things. My 3 things would be clowns.
Yeah.
Clowns of any kind, even happy clowns. And I don't even know how to describe it, but another one would be claustrophobia. Steve has a horrible story about, we went to New York City and I cannot get on an elevator if there are already too many people on an elevator. And we were staying in a skyrise hotel, like we were up on the, 20th floor. Yeah. So I was in the lobby of our hotel for an hour and a half.
Yep.
Waiting for an elevator that I could get myself talked into getting onto. And Steve finally got me drunk so we could go back up to the room. He's like, let's go to the hotel bar. Well, let's go to the hotel bar. We'll drink enough rum until you can't remember your name, and then we'll get on the elevator. Because New York really is the city that doesn't sleep. I mean, like there was here in Kansas, there'd be no elevator traffic at 5. Everybody's downstairs eating dinner.
Yeah,
but in New York City, man,
the door would keep opening, and she'd be like, nope. Wait for it to shut again. Hit the button.
Yeah, I mean, I'll take 20 minutes to walk upstairs, you know, but that's 20 flights in New York City, I couldn't do it. So it would be any kind of claustrophobia. And my other would be robots, technology talking to each other when they don't have permission.
Right.
Like our marriage is full, and it's not just our marriage, it's my life story, but our marriage is full of me telling Steve he has to take something electronic to the garage. Garage is the timeout space in our house where the electronics get sent if they talk to each other without my permission. So
we had a microwave out there one time.
Right. I had a microwave that tried to answer the phone and interfered with the computer line because it was an old fashioned microwave, like one of the first microwaves. And an old technician finally, like I had gone through every technician AT&T had. And finally this old guy gets on and he goes, "How old's your microwave?" And I said, "What are you talking about?" And he goes, "Sometimes the microwave can interfere with the DSL line and the wireless internet connection." I was like, "Hold on."
Nope.
And he's like, "Yeah," he's like, "You're going to have to separate them." So we moved my office to the upstairs out of the kitchen, and we put the microwave in the garage.
Yeah, we had to buy a brand new one. That one was never allowed.
We couldn't have. I was like, that can never come back in the house if it's going to talk to DSL. Like, that's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. We can't have that. So Isaac Asimov ruined me. I mean, like, I fully believe the robot wars are coming, and we're doing it to ourselves.
Yep.
Yeah. So those would be my three.
You know what I thought? I thought you meant that the microwave actually spoke.
Oh, no. The radio waves were interfering with some other wave. Like the waves were bouncing on.
What did it say?
I mean, they might as well have been speaking.
We didn't realize.
Haunted microwave. That's just
Yeah.
And somebody would put something in the microwave to warm it up.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden things would just start going
crazy. The internet would try to dial up. I mean, it was insane. It was a bad, and that lasted for months. I wanted to move. I was like, we have to sell the house. Right. It seems like we can't sell the house. We have to figure out what's causing the problem. And I'm like, we're those people. We're those people who live in the haunted house, even though you should leave.
Right.
And I said, we can't be those people. We say all the time when we watch the movies, we wouldn't stay. Well, here we are. We're staying. Steve was already working 2 jobs. He's like, I don't have anything else to give. We're going to have to just figure it out. But I would have moved. I would have moved.
Before we run out of time here, I'd like to turn back to the book for a little bit. And get everybody's thoughts on what they liked most about the story. And I'll start with, for me, I love the whole thing, but one of the characteristics that really appealed to me was the subversion of who the hunter was and who was the prey. And
don't give any spoilers.
Okay, I won't.
Yeah.
I like that aspect of it. So, and with that, I'll turn it over. What was some of the factors or scenes or characteristics of the book that really appealed to each one of you?
I think for me, as one of the writers of the book, it was the kinship of the vampire trope. Like so often, vampires are portrayed as very unfeeling, but you can tell, even though it's a novella, there's this deep, I don't know whether it's affection, but this deep camaraderie between and protectiveness, especially from Selena with the rest of her troop. And they basically would have done anything for each other. And not saying, I don't want to give spoilers, but yeah.
I would say for me, it was the landscape, the setting. You had the wilderness and the isolation and the castle, and it was just the perfect backdrop to the story. And that sort of built in, it cast the shadows, that build into the dread. So for me, it's very much a character there as well. It was just, I just loved that aspect of it.
Yeah.
I think for me personally, I think it was just the concept. Just to try and do something a little bit different, maybe, and that was kind of the thing that sort of pulled me into the whole idea of it. Really, was just to try and explore something new, some new ground, but sort of mix it with something quite traditional as well. So hence the kind of dark age setting. So that would be it for me.
Yeah.
Well, I would say for me the biggest part that I really, really loved so much was as a vampire author myself, I'm of the school that I don't believe vampires are monsters, and I don't like it in films when they're hunted or killed. And, you know, maybe for me, this is a spoiler for my own books, but my vampires don't die unless they're really awful, and then sometimes they die. But they don't get hunted. They're the protagonists. They're not the antagonists. And this book really pulled that onto the mat, the whole concept of who is the monster in this story, you know, and it was just masterfully told in a novella setting. I mean, just no threads left untied. It was beautiful. I loved it.
I wanted to ask a question actually to Bev, if that's okay. Sorry, I'll keep it brief. I just wondered what it was like when you've got kind of like a number of years now working with this same vampire and vampire universe with the Gabrielle Davenport stuff, and then obviously in Conclave as well. Like, what was it like to work with a completely different vampire cast, and also with one that has like just totally different origins? How did you feel about that?
Yeah, well, gosh, that's a really good question, Kev. I think when Keith first came to me with the concept, I was, yeah, let's do this. And then I was like, oh, I've said yes, now I have to do this. And I have to come up with this whole vampire troupe, and there has to be this and that. And I was like, oh. But after that, I just settled down, and we'd already decided kind of the ages and the genders of the vampires that were included. So once I kind of got going on that, I found it quite exciting to be working with other vampires. The thing about this is because it's a novella, I couldn't go that deep into characterization like I do in my Gabrielle Davenport series or in Nicole and I's joint universe. And sometimes I had to hold myself back from going too deep into character because I knew I was dealing with a limited page time.
Sure.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Amazing.
Yeah. Because it's a different skill set to make it short. Yeah. Anybody else want to go? I would be hard pressed to pick.
I think the characters are wonderful. I mean, first of all, the descriptions are stunning. The environment is stunning, but then you have these vampires that, you know, so often you see vampires that are, for lack of a better term, just your standard, usually very privileged white men, or, you know, or women, but there's always like some sort of an element of aristocracy, and it's nice to see that it's a nomadic tribe that kind of sticks together and cares for each other. That's different, and I really appreciated that.
Yeah.
Randy.
I don't know if I could pick one thing. I mean, I loved that it was going to be in a historical setting, because I'm a big fan of dark fiction in history. I also, and I'm a huge fan. This has probably come out a time or two already. I'm a huge fan of Dread, and so
never mentioned
I know it's hard to imagine. But I think I'm gonna agree with Steph, because for me, I really also enjoy a book where the setting takes on its own kind of character feel, and it plays such a role in the characters and the plot that, you know, it's interesting. And I wonder if this is true. I had an author recently ask me if that's they asked me what's the unifying theme of all the books we choose. And I wonder if that's one of them. I wonder if its setting feels like its own character in several ways, which I always kind of equate, Steve will tell you wrongly so, but it feels very folklore-ish to me. You know, when a place takes on, like, I'm a character in a book, and it influences how characters respond and moves they make next, more than just the geography, but like, I don't know, just buildings and seasons and weather, like it.
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe that is the unifying theme. Maybe that is the thing that I'm secretly attracted to that I hadn't really thought of before. But I do feel like that. Like there's kind of if you took it out, you would feel like you were missing a character.
Yeah.
I guess is how I feel. You know, if you removed all of the descriptors from the book, you would feel like you were missing a character. I would feel like it was missing a character. What about you? Do you remember? Sometimes it's hard to remember. Right. You know, when you say yes to a book and it takes it so long to get it to the field that you're like, well.
Well, I mean, no, I would agree in the sense of a lot of the things we read. That is something I think that appeals to both of us is a real powerful sense of the setting.
Right, right. So, but it's funny because we argue all the time about what's more important, the setting or the character. And so it sounds like we have a volatile marriage, and that might be that we like to call it passionate. Yes. But we do, because Steve, character development is very important to Steve. And I have been known on occasion to be like, I don't care what this person feels about their coffee. If we don't get through the coffee scene, we're not going to make it. So
it's established.
Right. We don't have to do that here. We don't need to do the Heather and Steve show here. We'll save that for a YouTube video later. But so I just want to say congratulations, Bev and Keith, because I think it's an incredible, of course, I'm biased, but I think it's an incredible work. And it is available everywhere now. So I highly recommend it if you have a vampire lover or a dread lover on your holiday wish list to buy for. I would highly recommend this book. So, because it kind of checks all the boxes for that kind of story lover.
Yes.
So, well, guys, thank you so much for taking time out of your day to join us.
Thank you.
Well, thank you.
It's been a pleasure.
Very good having everyone here. Thank you all for showing up.
Yeah.
Absolute pleasure.
Jenny, dread in the middle day. Love it.
Yes. Go, Jenny.
Yes. Yes. Dread on page 2. Yeah. All right, guys. Thank you so much. And congratulations, Bev and Keith. It's really a phenomenal book.
Thank you.
Bye, guys.
Everyone.
Bye.
Yes.
See y'all later.